I'm going to talk.
Right there.
You know, I first started out calling this presentation the war against identity theft because it's similar to a presentation that I made to a group of CPAs about 2 weeks ago. And as you would imagine, in the world of accounting and auditing, identity theft is a big deal. And it is a war. But one of the things that occurred to me is that probably in this class, I'm guessing that you're more concerned as an MBA, as a group of MBA students, you're probably more concerned with the business, with the business implications of identity theft. So I reworded the title. So I'm plagiarizing from my old document. I reworded the title to call it the business of identity theft. Right? So I'm going to focus a little bit less on, it is a war that's going on against identity theft. And you know, I make references to some of the problems that are going on as I go through this. I have to make acknowledgments, so I'm giving cites. Be very careful here. I'm giving cites. There are actually 3 books that were published, that have been published in the last couple of years. One of them is by Frank Abagnale. I don't know if you've seen the movie already, To Take a Thief, or To Catch a Thief.
Catch a Thief.
Yeah, To Catch a Thief. Frank Abagnale is a guy who basically made a living by stealing, by fraud. I think he once said, he actually spent time in jail eventually, but he made his living essentially by forging checks, primarily. But he did all sorts of other things, including posing as an airline pilot and flying trans-Pacific flights to get put up in hotels at the airline expense. He was paid. He says the only credential that he ever actually earned was passing the bar exam, and I forget which state it is.
Louisiana.
Louisiana. Now, he never ever did any courses in law. He never went to law school, but he did pass the bar exam. So, he's a very bright guy. Now he has paid his debt to society. He's out of jail. Now he makes his living doing lectures for about $5,000 an hour. So you can say, you can kind of wander in your own mind if he isn't still stealing, but now it's legal. Okay. Maybe one day I'll be able to earn $5,000 an hour doing lectures like this. Who knows?
But you have to be a thief first.
Well, yes. And my problem is I've never been a thief. I've been an auditor. My whole career has been in auditing and accounting. So, my first degree was actually a computer science degree, but I graduated in 1980 when nobody had. I don't think Microsoft was incorporated until 1981. So when I graduated, there was no such thing. I worked on something called an IBM 360, which was a mainframe that had about 512K of memory, a mainframe. Anyway, there's another author named Bruce Schneier who wrote a book called Beyond Fear. And the main principle of his book, and I'm going to focus on this at the end of my presentation, is to think about security in a sensible way. So, a lot of the things that you will see and read about security, especially related to fraud and identity theft and so on, it's very hyped up. And you start thinking about all of the complexities of security and all of the technical things you have to worry about, the physical things you have to worry about, and so on. And his whole premise is to say, let's just think sensibly about security. And the third book is Bob Sullivan, and I actually met him recently. He's a journalist with MSNBC. He's a journalist with MSNBC who specializes in writing stories on identity theft. And I wish I had been able to get from him some of it. He had a couple of little tips, just giving examples of the fear and the suffering that people go through as a result of identity theft. Right? So my presentation has a lot from these 3 books. Turns out that identity theft, and remember we're thinking of this from a business perspective, but this is the easiest con of all. there is a true story about a fellow named Anthony Dwight Stone. He was a pretty sort of regular guy, living somewhere in the Midwest, and he had a job working. It was basically a clerical job that he had, but he was doing okay. He was getting ready to get married to his girlfriend, and he was driving home one night, and the police pulled him over because he had been drinking a little bit too much and he was kind of wavering in the road. But anyway, they pulled him over, looked at his driver's license, and hauled him off to jail. They said that his name, his driver's license, his identity document, when they checked it out, seemed that he was wanted in 3 different states. He had about 35 driving violations, tickets. He was wanted for theft and forgery in 2 other states, and so on. So he spent at least that first night in jail. And they said, well, your driver's license doesn't say Anthony Dwight Stone. It says your name is, it has your picture, but when I run it, the name that comes up is Thomas Earl Batts. And he said, well, that's impossible. That's my girlfriend's brother. Turns out, and of course, because this was his girlfriend's brother, this person, Thomas Earl Batts, had access to all sorts of personal information about him, and in fact had been regularly using his identity for all kinds of nefarious purposes for about the last 2 years. He wasn't even aware of it until just by accident, basically. The police stopped him and ran his driver's license. Essentially, to steal someone's identity, if you can get their full name, their date of birth, and their social security number, with just those 3 things, within about 24 hours, you can create an identity based on those 3 pieces of information. It's as easy as that, literally. Okay? It's nice for the person who's committing this kind of fraud because there's no guns, there's no knives, there's no violence. All you need is a computer and a phone line. Because access to this name, date of birth, and social security number is very often available just on public databases. There was a case recently where I think the family court in, was it Arkansas? Basically was posting the name, or was posting records about people who are failing to pay child support in the state. And the information that was being posted included their name, their social security number, and their date of birth. Public records. Clearly that has been since cleaned up. This was about 2 or 3 years ago. But
Not long ago.
not that long ago. Not that long ago. And even now, I'm going to give you the names of a couple of websites where you can enter your name and just see what shows up on those free websites about you. Anybody here ever tried Googling their own name?
Yeah.
Interesting what shows up, isn't it? And that's public information. Okay. Interestingly, you say, well, with all of this kind of risk that's out there because of identity theft, identity fraud, you'd think law enforcement would be very, very interested in trying to protect against this. Not so. In fact, if you report a stolen bicycle, if you report that somebody has stolen your child's bicycle, you probably will get quicker and more attention from law enforcement than saying, I think I've had my identity stolen. Because until very, very recently, law enforcement just didn't know how to react when somebody says, I think my identity has been stolen. It's only 2004, 2005 that actually laws have been put in place now in the USA that define the crime of identity theft. Until then, it wasn't even defined as a crime. Right? Interestingly, you can have very high or very low profile victims. I gave you the example of Anthony Dwight Stone, who is a relatively unknown person, very low profile. But there's another story about a busboy in a restaurant in New York who was essentially skimming credit card information from a number of high profile people, including Ross Perot, Oprah Winfrey, Michael Bloomberg, Ted Turner, Robert
How did the
De Niro.
busboy get access to the?
Credit cards when they pay. Just skim the credit card. There is actually a
He
machine.
must have been a waiter or something.
Yes, yes, he was a busboy waiter. I mean, he would pick up, they put the credit card down. A busboy will do this. You think about it. You get your bill in a restaurant, you put your credit card down with it. Somebody comes and picks it up. You probably hardly even pay attention. Maybe they're wearing an apron. Under the apron, chances are they have a cell phone and they have stuff that you're not even aware of. So under their apron, they have a machine. They skim the credit card. You may not even be aware of it, but now they have your information. The statistics are that every 4 seconds in the USA, identity theft, the crime of